Round 20 buy, hold, sell. We are at the end of the major buy rounds. It now becomes about who has the best team, who can carry it home. Biz, would you say this is the most important period of the year or just one that people need to get right?
Yeah, I think it's quite important. I wouldn't say it's the most important part of the year because I feel like if you haven't done well up until this point, you've probably given up and you've stopped logging in. But in saying that, you can make a massive run now. As I said, people start dropping off or people are running out of trades, even though you get 8 more this week. If you can pick the right guys now to get on a hot run in the last 6-7 rounds, then you can fly up the rankings.
Absolutely. Yeah, because this is about who's got the best team over the next 8 weeks, right? And that's where these guys come in. So the top tier category, look, we're going to talk through it a bit differently this week. We got top tier, buys, cash outs, and then the holds or sells. For top tier, these are, in my eyes, and I think in your eyes too, really just the top guys at each position. So we'll talk through these guys here. And look, obviously Origin hasn't been played yet, so keep that in mind when you do watch this, if you're watching this after Origin. First one's Harry Grant. Look, easily just the best hooker in fantasy. Damien Cook's been dodgy. Reece Robson's been dodgy. Guys like Reed Marnie, Jeremy Marshall-King, they haven't really stepped up due to injury or form. So Harry Grant's just the number one hooker in the game. 752K is a fantastic discount. He'll be 900K before the end of the year. So that's an easy buy for my liking. I'll throw Isaiah Yeo to you next.
Yeah, Isaiah Yeo is similar. He's averaging around 65 for the year, super consistent. The only thing to be wary of is will he get rested after Origin this week? He might actually get a bit of less of a role this week with Murray in the starting team, but let's see what the final team composition looks like. But Yo's a guy you want in your team ASAP. If there's any player that's averaging over 60 in fantasy for such a long period of the year, you want them in your team for the run home. We've talked about it before. I think there's not much left to be said. Another guy similarly is David Fafita.
Yeah, look, 852K, he's in great form. Watch him in Origin. That's the big one. But the Titans need wins. They need them now. So if they're going to lean on Fafita. The other thing is Stimson is out of the team as well. So they don't really have a great option to step in now because Khalees Haas is already in that starting side. So he's just a guy, if you need an edge, which you probably don't, you're probably more needing a mid this week for Yo. But if you can take Fafita, you're happy there too. Nathan Cleary up here. Now, I'm going to throw this at you, and I think we should both chat on this one. How hot do you think Cleary is as a buy this week? So if you could give it a grade, say let's go a school grade from A to F. How high are you on this as a buy this week?
Well, he's on the extended bench, but I have a feeling he'll play. He's got a great match. I think he's got the Dogs this week. He's got the Dogs this week? I think he's got the Dogs this week.
I think it's the Dolphins.
Dolphins, okay. Dogs was next week. I was expecting him to be back next week. So in my head, I had 100 break even versus the Dogs. I was thinking he's probably going to hit it. With the Dolphins, maybe not. I think it's probably a B.
Okay.
I just feel like if Penrith come out, they start hot, he gets subbed at the 60-minute mark this week. He's not going to play 80 unless it's a close game. With 100 break even, you can afford to wait a week. You can even use this week to kind of build the cash flow to get to him because he is quite expensive. I think the best case scenario is you wait a week, he scores maybe 60, 70, he drops quite a bit of money and you pick him up next week. But I am not against picking up this week because he will be a point of difference option, and Cleary is the type of guy who can score 100 even when he's on half a leg. So
yeah,
B+.
Yeah, look, Dolphins are a nice matchup. I agree. And I think that's one thing that counts a bit against Isaiah Yeo this week because I think they'll dust up the Dolphins this round. But for Nathan Cleary, I'm more rating him as a C- sort of buy. I just think because we have Nico Hines, you're probably not going to captain Cleary this week. And the re-injury risk on that sort of injury, because he's done the hammy there, it's pretty high. So for me, I think you're making a big move there. You probably don't have a full 17. You probably don't need a half either. I think you can wait a week. And the options that people would trade out for him have good matchups. So Parramatta have a nice matchup. You got Moses there. He'll do well. I don't know who else you'd be trading. You got Cleary there. You might have Matt Burton. He had a great game last week. He looked good next to Sexton. You probably want to give him another week. Look, Cherry Evans is a top tier gun. You don't want to trade him out. I just think people will make mistakes in rushing Cleary in. And I think he's a wait a week. And then he's a fantastic buy for next week, as you said, against the Dogs, where he can line up. So mixed opinions, but if you get Cleary...
To be honest, I completely agree with your analysis. The only reason I'm a bit higher is there's only 7 rounds left. Your time to make ground is compressed. So if you want to be a bit more gutsy, then it's not the worst. But I agree with your analysis. Like, I'm not bringing him in this week. So just
and to be fair,
so.
that's what you're saying too. He's done a very good job when he's come back from injury in the past. So he normally does well in this sort of game. So I can see it working for you. Last two here, Greg, Marzu, and Dan Gagai, 668k and 640k. Just a bit of a condensed written form there. For these guys, look, Gagai is back from injury this week. That's pretty nice. Marzu's just been in great form. They've got the Tigers this round. The Tigers' backline is disjointed, to say the least. It's looking pretty dodgy.
That's very kind of you. Very, very nice.
I've got a soft spot for the Tigers, but they're not great right now. Look, either of these guys could go well. I lean towards Marzu just because there's no injury concern. Not that Gagai has a major one, but if we look at Marzu, unless he misses the team bus again, he's probably not going to miss out. And the Tigers' wings have been leaking some points too. So Marzu for 668k, pretty top flight gun, and a guy where if you could move Buller and get Marzu, you're pretty happy.
Yeah, Marzu's in my team this week. I think he'll be the top 2 wing fullback. He's just been consistent even when the Knights aren't. So I'm expecting a big score this week against the Tigers, and he's just a fun own, and he's not that highly. He's a bit of a pod, so he's a fun one to bring in.
Yeah, he's juicy. Let's go to the next group here. So the buys. Now these ones are a little more interesting, and I've realized. Oh no, I've got the same group. All right, I'm gonna say them verbally. We've got a bit of a rush recording today, everyone. So I'm on holidays and Viz is off in New York. But look for the buys. Let's throw some out here. So first one, Cherry Evans, Daily Cherry Evans. We've talked about him ad nauseum. Look, 714k is an easy buy. I'll throw the next one to you, Ruben Garrick, his teammate at 680k. What led you to going Marzu over Garrick?
To be honest, I want both of them this week. But if I had to prioritize one, I'd get Marzu just on the matchup. Yep. I want both of them because I need to buff up my wing fullbacks for the run home. I think they're pretty similar players in terms of scoring output. Garrick will do it more in a workman-like role, like a more fantasy-friendly Gutherson, whereas Marzu is just going to break his tackles, score some tries where he's busting over 3 people to get to the edge. I think you could go either one of them, but I personally like Marzu just because it's a bit more of an exciting own, and he's got. I say more of a chance to go 80 plus, but Garrick's really shown the ability to do that as well, and Manly will look to him to create points with, especially because he's replacing Turbo. Manly haven't been great this year, and they're not a good defensive team, so they'll probably get involved in a lot of shootouts. So I can see Garrick scoring a lot of points.
Yeah, both hot options. And then Herbie Farmworth is the next guy we had here. So 690k. My view is that he has less of that explosive upside, but he's at a position, the center spot, where you probably have more need, potentially. So for Herbie Farmworth, look, when we're looking at Herbie Farmworth, Dan Gagai, Ruben Garrick, Greg Marzu, the question is, do you need a center or do you need a wing fullback? Just have a look at your roster there. But Herbie is rock solid. He's a guy that he's producing 150 meters a game with the ball in hand, and he's sort of cranking out base stats, and then he has that attacking upside. So he's an easy option. Next guy I want to throw out here, and this is a real pod, so this is pretty divisive across the board. Tino Famasua Ali at 839k.
Yeah, look, he's an interesting one, isn't he? I don't know if you had your thoughts on him, but he has been, I think he's under 6-7% ownership. He's just cranking around 70. He's just cranking out these big scores. He's scoring a lot of
tries in a row as well.
Yeah, he's scoring a lot of tries, but Tino is not your average workhorse middle forward. He is a try scorer. He has the ability to be that Ryan James from 2016 who scored 15 tries in the year from prop position. And they will really lean on him. They're on the fringe of the 8 right now, and he's in great form. Do I think it's sustainable? No, but there's only 6-7 weeks left, so you don't really need to have that sustainability over the whole season. If you think he's just in a hot run of form, even if you can replicate it for 4 or 5 more weeks, it's worth bringing him in.
Yeah, no, he's on hot form. He could be that pod on the bench potentially. If you're lacking mids as well, you can't get Payne Haas this week. So if Isaiah Yeo were to rest, for example, that makes Tino the number one middle forward option, basically, to pick up. So, yeah, I could see it working. Look, I'm not going to do it myself, but I could see how it would come up clutch for someone, and it would be interesting. The other thing to look at there too is they got Sam Verrills back from injury, and there's definitely a bit of a correlation in Tino's scores and Sam Verrills playing. So potentially the upgrade at hooker. Chris Randall does a job in defense, but he's not really that creative guy. Whereas Verrills has shown a bit of an ability to scheme. Maybe he's opening up Tino a bit more. Maybe their form improves. They're leaning on him a bit more too. Yeah, it could be interesting. Last guy here we've got is Ryan Madison at 663k. And look, you might not have bought him last week. You might not have had a way to get him in. You might have had a few Raiders and Dragons middle forwards already. You didn't need him. But this week you might be lacking in the middles. So look, 663k. He's a cut price keeper at that middle position where a lot of people have needs. That's why he's there. If you don't have him yet, it's not too late to buy him. He goes back into the forward rotation. I just think he's an easy buy. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that dual position helps too. Madison just looked pretty good last week, even in a beaten team playing at 5'8". And when I say looked good, I don't mean in a traditional half sense. He wasn't great playmaking, but he looks strong in terms of his carries. So if he's coming in with momentum up the middle, RCG and Paolo are back in the team this week, I think he comes in, plays 55, 60 minutes, and hopefully runs away with a big score, scores some tries. Eels have been pretty hot recently, and if they can carry that form, obviously last week disregard, but Madison could be a great pot, and at 650k, it's pretty much de-risked at this point.
He's juicy, yeah, and that price is nice. The other guy in the picture here too, Toby Sexton. Now, look, he's at a low price. He got 48 points the other day. He's one of those guys where we talk about a few options where, look, if your season's gone well and you've got big cash in the bank, you're not buying Toby Sexton. But if you're looking for a keeper on the end of your bench, you already have Matto. You're looking for a guy for 600k odd who could go with those top guys. Sexton could be a dice roll for that. I was a bit concerned about his kick meters. He only had about 200 kick meters, but the game script wasn't so that there were a lot of kick meters on offer. And the dogs look good. Like, I reckon there could be a chance here for Sexton to be a 50 average down the stretch, which for 600k, you could take that.
Yeah, I just don't know how it just looked like a very shared playmaking role. The Dogs are a very meh team, and they were versing the South with half their squad gone. So I'm not sure how much I like that, but at this end of the season, you're better off rolling the dice if you have to than playing conservative, because you're not going to make inroads being safe here. So he could just be a guy that just keeps churning out big scores. Dogs are kind of like that Manly situation, as they're terrible in defense. So to even be in a game, they'll have to score a lot of points. So that leads to a lot of attacking stats. Even if they're garbage attacking stats, such as offloads to hand when there's 10 minutes to go and you're behind 20, they still count in fantasy the same. So in that regard, it could be worth it.
Yeah, definitely an if you're desperate option.
All right, boys, it's just me now, solo. This is what happens when you're not together anymore in the same place in Sydney. But I'm gonna keep going. We'll go straight into the cash cows. Tyron Wishart here, 220k. He's the type of person that I'd probably avoid. Wishart is the type of player who gets minutes when the Storm are backing up from Origin. They're short of player here or there. But Wishart as a cash out, it's interesting because you can potentially take that red dot like we've been talking about and use him as a loop option going forward and just baking in that cash for those top tier guns. But you also want to be careful that you're not bringing in too many red dot guys that just offer you no bench productivity at the end of the year. So, for example, I've already got Rajab, who's a red dot. I've got Monroe, who could be a red dot. I've got Garlic, who might as well be a red dot. I need a strong 18th man. I can't be relying on these players. So, Wishart, I'm not that hot on. Garlic, similar position. I think Garlic is a bit safer because he plays most games, but he's only going to get you 15, 20 points, which, at a pinch, if you need to play him 1 week, isn't the end of the world. There's not much to talk about here. He might get extra minutes this week with Grant backing up. We might not get the full 80, but otherwise, he could be he could be decent, but I would only use both Wishart and Garlic. You only want to use them to cash out completely. So if you want that money to get Cleary next week, or a Fafita, or Harry Grant, or a Yo, cash out to these guys. Don't expect much from them. Don't expect 30, 40, 50 each week. You're just using them for cash. The next one is Harrison Graham. Again, the Dolphins have too many players rotating in and out. Jeremy Marshall King could be back in a couple of weeks. I know it's kind of one of those injuries that keeps lingering, but it's just not worth the risk. If you're putting up 269k, you might as well go bargain basement and get a Wishart 220k. Like same kind of scoring reliability. You might get a week or two out of him, but you're pocketing an extra 50k. I don't think there's too much to be said on Graham. The next one, Kapoa. Kapoa's an interesting one. He's dual position. He's played in the in the edge rotation for the Tigers before, but in saying that, he doesn't have the greatest job security. He's played most games this year, but Tigers have been a team to make changes after getting stomped. Unfortunately, getting stomped quite often this year. But at 265k, there, as a cash out option in the backs, it's a pretty decent shout out. But again, don't rely on him because there is a situation he just gets dropped and you don't see him again for the rest of the year, especially if Tigers look to blood young players for next year. The last one is Blake Wilson. Now, Blake Wilson is an interesting one. 297k coming off a Hattie. Look, they've put him on the wing this week, moved Karaz to the centers. This is a great call from the Dogs. I think Karaz is a fantastic center. I think Wilson has shown that he can be a very good winger in the game. My only problem with Wilson is we've seen that he's very reliant on big plays. He had an 11-point game in 80 minutes against the Roosters, who aren't particularly threatening this year. He's got the Broncos and Panthers next to. This could be shutouts on both games. So he could do well. He could score a try, run it like the end of a sweep play and keep his spot, but there's a chance Dogs get smashed this week and next week by the Broncos and the Panthers, and he drops out of the team. So with that risk profile, maybe you're better off pocketing a few more grand and going to a base price cashy. So that's our cash cows for the week. The last section is hold or sell. Now I'm going to run through these real quick because it's pretty quick to analyze. Jake Simpkin. Look, if Coruscant looks like he's back this week, he's obviously named at 9. Whether he plays is a different story. If Coruscant plays, I think you can cash out Simpkin this week to one of the cash outs we mentioned, or you can hold him. His break even is 10. He's not going to lose too much money, even if he gets on and scores 5 points. But for teams who only probably have 14, 15 right now, to include a 5 in there, it's probably not great. So at that point, have a look at cashing him out. Jake Turpin, break even of 48. Brandon Smith on the bench. It's time to go. Even if he gets a big minute role, he's probably only scoring 50-odd points and not making you that much money. I think you're better off running off with the cash on him or upgrading him to a top-tier gun. Jareem Buller, this is an interesting one. Look, he's got the Knights this week. It's not the worst matchup. I would keep Buller this week, especially with so many players missing. Next week, if he has a poor game again, I think it's time to make sure you trade him when he's at a high. Look for guys like Garrick next week, Marzu, if you're not getting him this week. These are the types of players you want. And Reece Walsh is back next week at 650k. He's worth upgrading to. It only take 120-odd k. So Walsh next week for Buller is a great trade. I'd hold Buller this week. Isaiah Papali'i. Oh, man. What can I say? It is tough. I don't think the Knights are a bad matchup for Papali, but he hasn't been great this year. If there's someone you need to clear out to get to a Cleary or a Yo, Isaiah's probably the one I'm getting rid of. But this week, if you need him, hold him. I think you can give him one more week. He might have a bounce back game. Who knows? I mean, he's been reasonably consistent this year. I know last week was a terrible score, but low 50s average for the year. It's not like it's an urgent trade out. He should still get 80 minutes. He can pop off for a score, but he does not look like the top tier keeper in the edge position this year, especially with guys like Fafita carving up, Bateman, his edge partner, doing a lot better. The last one on this list is Tanner Boyd. Now, he's done a job for you all year. 630k now. Is he a keeper? No. There are a ton of halves this year that are killing it. Cleary, Hines, Moses, even Cherry Evans, who hasn't been as hot. Sean Johnson obviously has been amazing. Like, Boyd is not even close to that top tier. So while he's still got some value, let's upgrade him. Even if you're using him at the hooker spot, he's actually not too bad if you're using him as a hooker. I think you need Harry Grant. And let me quickly finish up on Tanner Boyd. As I was saying, in your halves, he's not a keeper. As a second hooker, he's not the worst because you definitely need Grant. Like, he's very much a must-have because he's so much better than every other hooker this year. But if you've got Cook or, Tanner Boyd, they're not doing too differently this year. Cook was randomly also benched in his last game, and he played 60 minutes. I'd just keep Boyd over a 60-minute Cook. I feel like you do need to run two hookers because you just never know, with Grant, if he gets rested towards the back end of the year, if Storm have locked up a position. So Tanner Boyd is a hold if he's your second hooker, but if he's in your halves rotation, absolutely, it's time to upgrade him to one of the tier 1 halves. But look, Grant and Boyd as your combination hookers, not the end of the world. Ideally, you have a Grant, Cook, Grant, Robson. But at this point of the year, if you're low on trades, I'm not sure the Boyd up to a Cook or Robson is worth it, unless you see them building up some form towards the back of the year. But yeah, that's buy, hold, or sell this week. Again, sorry for the disruptions. Longy's out in the bush, having a great time. I'm in New York. Life's good for all of us. At this point of the season, let me just put it to you straight. Fantasy now is simple. Get the top tier guns and get the base price cash outs. You don't have to worry about maneuvering buys. You don't have to worry about, finding value at the 500k range. This is really like tier 1 or tier 0. Like, just hit the top and pick up the bottom. Get that cash going. This is fun because this is where this is the point of fantasy where you're just seeing absolute shootouts. You're aiming for 1,000+ points every week. You've just stacked up with 15, 16 guns and a pseudo gun or, kind of just below a gun in your 17th and 18th man. But otherwise, thanks again for having us. If you haven't seen us already or subscribed, please like and subscribe to the channel, share it around. And one thing I will say is, as we're getting towards the back end of the season, the content will get a bit more crisp in terms of shorter, sweeter, hitting the points. But stay with us for the end of the year. And we're going to have a lot of exciting stuff in the off-season as we build into next year as well. This is a chance for you to really get to know the players and start thinking about next year. Even if you're a bit clocked out for the rest of this season, start looking at the trends because you might unearth some gems here that are relevant for next year's season. But otherwise, have a great week.
Love that. See you, everyone. Catch you in the next one.